Tōtahi me mihi ki ngā takitaki o te rohe nei. First, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands we gather upon. Nō reira, mihi ana ki o koutou Māori o Coast of Salish. Ngā tangata Squamish, ngā tangata Musqueam, ngā tangata Tsleil-Wautuki. E mihi ana hoki ki ngā kaiwhakahaere o te Rotorua, to the PRIDoC Council, the organising committee, thank you. The COVID-19 pandemic has had profound effects on all our peoples, and so the ability to come together today to unite and celebrate as Indigenous brothers and sisters has been soul food for us all. Kia ora koutou katoa, to all the delegates, your whānau, your ancestors that you bring with you today. Kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Ko waia. Ko Tararua te maunga, ko Aotearoa, ko Ngati Raukawa, ko Taranaki, ko Te ORA, ko Ngati Raukawa. My name is Kasey, and I come from Otaki, which is a small town in the lower island of Aotearoa. I'm honoured to speak here today on behalf of Te ORA. My journey has very much been shaped by Te ORA members over the years, and so to acknowledge their support and guidance, I stand here today to share a little bit about myself and some of the mahi or work that I do. I'm also honoured to share space. So I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge the beautiful Elizabeth Gray, Lily Gray, Tonga artist who's travelled here to keep me calm and to also show you beautiful skills as a tōhuna in her art. I recently qualified as an obstetrician and gynaecologist after a pretty long journey. But the first birth I ever saw was the birth of my cousin. So we were in my auntie's house, we were in her sitting room, she was leaning up against the couch in labour. My mother, a midwife, was supporting her through her labour process. Surrounding her were her children, her stepchildren, my sister and I, my aunties, my uncles, and the room was full of love. A year later, I helped birth my nephew. Again, it was a sitting room. This time it was my sister sitting against the couch in labour, and this time it was me coaching her through her labour. And again, there were aunties, uncles, brothers, sisters, cousins, and the room was full of love. There are many other home births in my whānau, and actually I didn't even know you could birth in a hospital until I went to medical school. So now as a clinician who works within the hospital system, I try and stay grounded to those emotions and those memories of my whānau and their birthing journeys. The feelings of love, of support, and of empowerment. And in my career, I ask myself, how can I help create a safe space? How can I help create those emotions and feelings for the whānau that I see? I'm going to use this drawing to send to my corridor today. It was drawn and gifted to us last year during a webinar where there were artists, clinicians, Indigenous whānau all discussing the maternity space. And so, like living, I'd also like to acknowledge the artist Tūmaki Tūli, because I'm privileged to use his beautiful imagery today. It depicts Te ORA, which means a safe haven. It's a space of creation and a space of potential, and it needs to be nourished and nurtured. We know as Indigenous clinicians that the Western health framework does not engage our whānau, and it doesn't connect. And where there's disconnection, there's risk for distress, and where there's distress, there's trauma. A strong cultural identity is a protective health determinant. Our ancestors knew that. Traditionally, when a woman was hapa as a child, we had tōhuna, experts reciting whakapapa or genealogy. We had kōrero, lullabies composed. We had time rural planned. tying the umbilical cord with muka, flax fibre, and returning the placenta, whenua ki whenua, back to the earth. These all had the purpose of grounding the child, of telling them who they were, where they were from, and preparing them for the journey to the world that they were to enter. When a young girl started her menstruation, she received moko kauai, her birthright marked on her chain. She had hakiri, first with her whānau. She celebrated with karakia, prayer, chant, waiata, song. And again, returning the tuko, or the blood, back to Papatuanu. All these to acknowledge the significance of Te Whai Tangata, the womb, and to celebrate the crossing from childhood to womanhood, and to celebrate the continuation of whānau, of family, of genealogy. So I see the revitalisation of our Indigenous knowledge as our way of reclaiming our space, of reclaiming our power, to empower women and their whānau to advocate for themselves, in particular when navigating the Western health system. Our Indigenous knowledge also holds space for healing, birth trauma, miscarriage, stillbirth, infertility, hysterectomy, gynecological cancers. These are all experiences that I've seen that can create trauma for women and their whānau that can be carried through the generations. In Aotearoa, Māori women have the highest maternal mortality rate, and this is largely driven by a higher rate of suicide. But within our knowledge, within our Indigenous knowledge, we have a place to draw strength from. We have a place to draw courage, to start, to heal. We had a question asked this conference about postnatal depression and how they traditionally addressed it. Last year I was part of a whānau where we asked that question also. And we talked about the fact that traditionally we were comfortable to sit within Te ORA, or darkness. That actually part of our healing process was to sit in Te ORA, to wānanga or process I hua I toko ki ngā mai ki te whaiao. So before coming back to the world of light. And we understood that in order to heal, there was a process that we had to go through. Next in this picture, I'm going to talk about tamaimai, which is the umbilical cord. And when I think of the umbilical cord, I think of connections between pepe and māmā, between pepe and whānau, between pepe and tipuna. It's also about reciprocity. So the umbilical cord holds vessels that carry to and from. Aroha mai, aroha atu, love is received and love is given. And so if a whānau wish to use and bring traditional practices during their birthing, during miscarriage, during surgery, then I have a role in enabling this and ensuring that there are no barriers within the hospital setting. And it's about connecting whānau who bring this Indigenous knowledge into a mainstream clinical system. But to do this, we need culturally safe healthcare workers and we need culturally safe policy. Cultural safety has been a focus of many of our medical special colleges and also a standard of practice from our medical council. Within my own medical college, RANZCOG, we spent a long time developing the process of how to deliver, or how to develop and how to deliver an Indigenous health curriculum to our trainees and to our fellows. It's been deliberate and intentional who we ask, so our Indigenous medical health educators, who we ask to help us formulate this and how we deliver it. It's now compulsory for all trainees to undergo this module, and soon will be compulsory for our internationally trained medical specialists, obstetricians and gynaecologists, when they come to Aotearoa. And in terms of delivering culturally safe policy, we'll just use an example. A lot of our whānau are using buka, flax fibre to tie the umbilical cord. It's a beautiful practice, it's empowering and connects connects us to the whenua, to Papatuana, through our birth mother. It connects us to Te Maori, our Indigenous worldview. But the hospital wanted a policy. They wanted a guideline that outlines the tikanga, or the protocols and law behind muka. Pro tip for writing policy about tikanga in a mainstream institution? Don't. Tikanga is not defined by policy, it's defined by whānau. So instead, let the policy ensure that whānau are supported to use such a practice safely. Let the policy demand that maternity health care workers know how to tie a knot, so that if they come across a whānau who wish to use muka, but maybe less confident in their knot tying, then they can assist. Let the policy ensure that maternity health care workers check and encourage the whānau to check the integrity of the muka as it dries over the next few days so it doesn't slip. That they check and help the whānau to check the signs of infection. Let the policy connect clinical competence and cultural safety. We also connect to our communities, and I've heard lots of people about this conference. Our communities often are the ones who know what's best for them. They don't need even an Indigenous doctor coming to tell them what that is. Through the COVID-19 pandemic, when Māori were being disadvantaged with the vaccination rollout, it was our communities that stood up and got the mahi, got the job done. And we as clinicians, we took a role of supporting. So our reciprocity to our communities is to assist with empowering them to make their own health decisions, whether it be helping them with social media content, face-to-face hui or discussions, Zoom hui became the norm over COVID. The connections that we make and the roles we play will be defined by our communities. And more recently, having finished my training and gaining fellowship, I'm more cognizant of all the support that I've gained from senior members of Te ORA, of PRIDoC, of our Indigenous medical educators. And these connections have helped mould me in how I see Indigenous health. And so now I ask, how can I reciprocate? How can I give back? And how do I guide the next budding Indigenous doctors to 1, strive for the best Māori health outcomes, and 2, become fabulous Māori obstetricians, gynaecologists who are going to help take over the world. To draw this kōrero to an end, I come back to the theme of our conference, connecting with the spirit of the land. And from my analogy with this picture, this leads us to talk about the whenua of the placenta, which is an anchor for you. Placenta are beautiful organs. I have many placenta in my hands. They have vessels that spread and attach to māmā, and they harness her energy, but it's energy to be passed on. The vessels also look like tree roots that dig deep into Papatuana and into her. And so it's only fitting that when our placenta are birthed and our whenua are birthed, that they are returned to the ground. And so from the words of Dr. Rose he ke mai te awa te atua mai te Papatuana, he tika kia hoki atu te awa atua ki aia. He tika kia hoki atu te whenua ki aia, hau mai tātou mai rāua. Whenua ki te whenua, awa tapu ki a Papatuana. The river of humanity descends from Papatuana, and so the divine river returns back to her. So too the placenta returns to her. It was gifted to us from her. Placenta back to the land, the sacred river back to Papatuana. For me, my anchor and who I harness my energy from is my whānau. And so today in the audience I can ask Ray. And my tornado. And Aotearoa extended whānau that have all supported me in my journey, and there will never Indigenous peers that have been my saving grace through the years. They understand me on a different level compared to my whānau. They provide safe soundboard. They allow a space to vent and to rant. They listen and they love me when I've been vulnerable and hurt. But they also argue with me and they challenge me, which I also think is important. I think as Indigenous clinicians, that leaning into uncomfortable spaces actually gives rise to growth. When you take up that governance role in a medical college, or when you agree to be a keynote speaker at PRIDoC because your senior doctor told you to, there is growth in those opportunities. And sometimes filling your cup isn't always what makes us happy and bubbly. Sometimes it's what scares us and pushes us past our boundaries. I connect to the spirit of the land by empowering our Māori whānau, creating connections to further improve Māori health, by thinking to the future generations and what I may leave them, by connecting to who I am as a Māori woman. Ko Kasey Tawhara tōku ingoa, he wahine Māori aho. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou.